individuals live with epilepsy. 400,000 of them live right here in Florida. Help spread awareness of epilepsy by attending the 2017 Epilepsy Foundation of Florida's Gainesville Walk the Talk event on Saturday, March 25th at the University of Florida. Register today at efof.org/walkthetalk.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala!
All right, 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in right here in Ocala, actually in Silver Springs, at the old attraction, which is now a state park. There stands a statue of Chief Osceola, and the story of Native Americans, the indigenous people of this land, the Indians, is a sad story. It's absolutely a sad story. And when you read the little plaque at the bottom of the statue, it tells you the story of how Chief Osceola fought to prevent from being ordered to move out to Oklahoma and onto the different, I guess we call them, I don't know if we called them reservations back in those days or not, but basically to move from the land that his whole family had lived on, and everybody before him. And now you see this story out west with the pipeline, and I can't understand why we can't honor that one little promise that, okay, we'll give you a little piece of land and we'll put a pipeline under it and violate whatever we promised you we were going to do. That's the extent of my political commentary. We are so honored to have on the phone Tom Clavin. He and Bob Drury wrote the book, which is the heart of everything that is. It's actually the autobiography of the Sioux, is it Sioux, right? Sioux Indian, Oglala Lakota Chief Red Cloud. There you go. I can say Red Cloud. But anyway, so this is the young readers edition of this. You might be familiar with the book. This is for somebody in your family who wants to know more about it, and maybe is easier to read this version of this untold story of Red Cloud, the American legend. I didn't mean to muddy up the waters with a political commentary right there, Tom, and you might not even agree with what I said, but good morning. What an honor to have you on our show. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, you're welcome. Where are you right now?
I live in Sag Harbor, New York, which is about 100 miles east of New York City. It's sticking out in the ocean. We're waiting for a big snow to arrive today.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That'll be fun.
See, I'm from Long Island. Is that near the Teddy Roosevelt place? Is that near there?
No. Well, Teddy Roosevelt actually spent time in Montauk at the very tip of Long Island when he was back from Cuba with the Rough Riders. But his home area is much farther to the west.
Okay, yeah, I went there in October with my son. Even though I grew up there, I hadn't really spent much time there. But anyway, thank you for being on the air with us today. What was the idea, first of all, behind the original book, The Heart of Everything That Is, and then we'll talk about the new one, the Young Readers Edition?
Well, sometimes it happens that you come upon a good story by accident. I literally stumbled on this one, in that I was researching something else, and I happened to stumble upon a piece about what's known as the Fetterman Massacre, and it's something that took place in December 1866. And there are 3 times on American soil where an American armed force was wiped out to the last man, and the first one we're very familiar with, the Alamo. The third one we're very familiar with, Custer's Last Stand, and then in the second one, in between, is the Fetterman Massacre, and really nobody knows about it. So I got very curious about it, and I found out that it was the battle took place. The Indian leader was a man named Red Cloud, and I said, again, I had no idea who Red Cloud was. We were familiar with some leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. You mentioned Osceola, some others, but started doing some research, and eventually we were so fascinated by finding out about Red Cloud, about the Lakota Sioux of the 1840s and 50s and 60s, what's called Red Cloud's War. He became the only Indian leader who won a war against the U.S. government, that we just started collecting more and more information, and we didn't anticipate it would take about 4 years to do this book, but it just became such a fascinating, growing story that it took as much time as it took.
What is your thoughts as an American when you read what he had to say?
Well, I think a big reason why this story fascinated us is because I think Red Cloud represents the our relations with the Indians from, let's say, the early 1800s right into the 1900s. He was born in 1821. He died in 1909, and during that period of time is when the Indians were, at the peak of their ability to hunt and live their life, and then the encroachment of the white people, the battles that took place, the defeat of the Indians, and eventually their confinement on reservations. So Red Cloud experienced all of that. There wasn't any of that he didn't experience. So I think, seeing things through Red Cloud's eyes, he went from being a free person on his land to being a older man confined to a reservation.
Oh my gosh, it must have broke his heart. Did you empathize these are his words, right? Did you have to translate it, or was he writing in English?
Well, what happened was he was speaking in English. What became his autobiography was actually when he was living on the reservation. He was an older man, and there was a white man who became a very good friend of his. I think it was the postmaster or something like that. And he would engage Red Cloud in conversation almost every day, and then go back to his place and write down what Red Cloud had told him about the stories about his early life. And eventually, so he was writing in English what Red Cloud had told him, and Red Cloud by that point was speaking English too, because very few people, knew what his language was.
Sure.
And the manuscript, this guy tried to get it published, and it was actually lost for like 30 years until it was discovered in the basement of I think it was the Nebraska Historical Society, and it became what's called the autobiography of Red Cloud. And it's not complete. Like he didn't talk about his battles with the American Army. He probably was cagey enough to realize that, well, I really shouldn't talk about killing a lot of white people, because that's not going to be good. That could come back to haunt me.
Right.
So his autobiography goes up only to a certain point, to when he's like in his early 40s and had become the leader of the Lakota Sioux, and then it sort of stops right there.
I love some of the names, by the way, and I guess these are the translations. Young man afraid of his horses. That's one guy's name.
Yes.
That's his name.
That's his name. And
that would have been my name. That would have been my...
Yeah. And there's this Spotted Tail and Black Kettle Woman, and they some of these names are quite colorful, and to us they're quite colorful. The Indians probably just shrugged at them, because those weren't the names necessarily that they called each other, but this is the names that we white people sort of gave the Indians.
How does the title resonate with you? The heart of everything that is. Give us an idea of where that title comes from and what it actually means.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because at the center of the Red Cloud story is the Black Hills in southwest South Dakota. That was the area, and it's an amazing area. It's a beautiful area, and right on the border with Wyoming. And according to the Lakota Sioux legends, or their own origination stories, that was sort of like their Garden of Eden. That was where the Lakota Sioux originated from, and where their ancestors came from. And that was very much sacred land to them. And their name for it in the Sioux language was Pahasapa. And when you translate that, the literal translation of Pahasapa is the heart of everything that is. And that literally is true for the Lakota Indians. It is the heart of everything that meant things to them. And eventually, the reason why there was something called Red Cloud's War is because the white settlers and soldiers and prospectors and entrepreneurs and others who were heading west started to build forts and wanted to do gold prospecting in the Black Hills, and that's when Red Cloud, by this time, who was I guess you could call him the chief of not only the Lakota Sioux but aligned tribes with him, said, "You can't. You're going too far, and we will fight you to preserve the Black Hills." And when that didn't persuade people to back off, that's when the war began.
Wow.
It's just really amazing to me, because when the white man came in, of course, there was this language barrier, and instead of the white man trying to assimilate to the culture of the Native Americans and learn their language, the Native Americans tried to assimilate and learned the English language so they could communicate. I think they were really friendly, but the white man was just vicious.
Well, there was we've heard the term, and it gets taught in school, called manifest destiny. And there was an attitude as people were working their way farther and farther west that it is, among white people, that it is our destiny, it is our right and our destiny to conquer this land and use it for farming, use it for mineral prospecting, use it for grazing and raising horses and cattle and things like that. And so the Indians were really an inconvenient obstacle. We didn't see them, the concept of the Indian was that they were an inferior race, that they were savages, and we would do them a favor by converting them, let's say, to Christianity, by teaching them English, by getting them to go to white man schools. That was not something where we were doing something bad to them. We considered that as doing them a favor. We were improving them by forcing them not to speak their own languages and not to follow their own traditions.
Let me ask you something about that. That's a pretty heavy message, and in the original book, it would be appropriate. Is it in this book? Is it in the Young Readers edition?
It is, and it was an interesting process working with Bob and I worked with Kate Waters, who helped us adapt this, because we had never written for a younger audience before. Our books had been for grown-ups, and as was the original, The Heart of Everything That Is. And so we ended up, the idea of adapting this book for young readers was not to dumb it down by any means. I mean, there were some things we had to remove. I mean, the original book had some detail about the atrocities committed on both sides that we thought would be inappropriate for young readers. But we wanted to still keep in there the story of how increasingly, in the 1840s and 50s and 1860s, that there was an increasing presence of white settlers and soldiers, and that the attitude that the Indians were inferior and would be improved by becoming under our domination. And I think that school children, it's good to study that and get discussions about that.
I think so too. We had a discussion in the past about a similar topic, or the same topic, not exactly the same, but I had comments on the YouTube podcast that we put up of these things, and the comment was that I was a white apologist, and I'm thinking, hello, well, maybe I am, but why is that a bad thing? I mean, gosh almighty, we have such... We're not that now. I mean, you learn from your mistakes, and I'm not saying we're doing it now. Hopefully, we're not. Anyway, but we did it then. Yeah. I think it's important to know it. I don't know.
You began the segment talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline, and we are seeing some similarities in that the Indians and Native Americans who are protesting that pipeline, and of course there are many other people besides Native Americans who are protesting, but once again they're considered, they're viewed as an inconvenient obstacle. They need to be swept aside so that the pipeline can continue. So we're sort of seeing in a different century. Very similar to what happened in the 1800s. And since you brought it back up, we're violating our word. We gave them our word. This is your land. We won't mess with it. And land to them is like God to us, right? I mean, it's really sacred to them. And oh gosh, I don't know. It just drives me nuts that we couldn't have figured out to take a different path or something. Well, I think part of it is because... The reality of the situation is that the American Indian population in this country has very, very little political power. They represent a very small part of the population. They probably don't have much voting power to really change things. So they've never really had a very strong voice as far as Washington is concerned. And they may not have been, when people were planning this pipeline. I think obviously not much consideration was given to what the impact that could be had on American Indian land.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Tom Clavin is a superstar, and it's such an honor to have you on our show, sir. Can I ask you to hang on there for a little break, and then we'll be right back?
I'm happy to.
All right,
thank you.
We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Wednesday, clouds and some sunshine, warm and humid, with a shower and thunderstorm around, especially in the afternoon, the high 79 to 83. Partly to mostly cloudy and mild Wednesday night, low 62 to 66. Thursday, cloud and a shower followed by some afternoon sun, becoming breezy, high 78 to 82. Friday, mostly sunny and pleasant, but cooler, high 68 to 72. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
A young woman contemplating having an abortion is told by society that whether she has her baby or not, it is her choice. The House of One in Faith in Ocala wants to give that young woman a place to live in comfort during her trying time, to help her know that God's love is abundant and that He is not ashamed of her in any way. The House of One in Faith is free and confidential. For more information, call 352-687-8895.
All right, 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Tom Clavin is on the phone. He and Bob Drury wrote the book, The Heart of Everything That Is, and that came out a few years ago. I don't remember how long. But the new one we're talking about is the young reader's edition of the same book, The Heart of Everything That Is. It is the untold story of Red Cloud, an American legend. If you've been listening, then you kind of get the idea. How long ago was the original book put out?
The original book, the hardcover first edition, came out in November 2013. About a year later, the paperback came out, and that's it'd probably be hard to find a hardcover still in a bookstore, but the paperback is available.
Do you know, Robin brought up an important point that even though it's labeled as a young reader's edition, adults will read this and get something out of it, and maybe then look for the other book, the first book. Maybe
that could happen. In fact, I even had a friend of mine emailed me yesterday saying, who had just picked up the copy of the Young Readers Edition and said, "Well, now I really understand everything."
Well,
whatever worked.
That happens a lot. It was funny. You find a Young Readers Edition of some books, like in the doctor's office, and you pick them up, and you pick them up instead of looking at another meatloaf recipe. You pick up a book.
Right. Yeah.
And it's funny how sometimes that will lead you to the book that it's based on. The adult.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to see if I know that there are some teachers who have embraced the book and are going to be using it in their classes to talk about American Indian history, and really, it's not just American Indian history; it's American history. I mean, this is
right.
This is all about what was happening in the plains, and as our Western expansion continued, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is being talked with the students, and the student may tell a mother or father about it, and that might inspire them to go get the original book and find out the whole story. So it can work both ways. Somebody who maybe read the original book is going to say, I wouldn't give this book to my 14-year-old, but I would give the Young Readers Edition to him.
Okay, that would make sense, yeah. And I think it has a healthy influence overall. I mean, it gives you a better understanding of how we got to be where we are. The heart of everything that is, had the heart of everything that became as well. I mean, what we are right now became from that.
Yes, it did, and when that's why I say that it's really American history, because we don't realize that in order to have the history, or to have the country that we have now, and to have the Wyoming that we have now, to have the Dakotas that we have now, to have the Colorado that we have now, there were decades of friction between the white settlers and the U.S. Army and the Indians who were the original inhabitants there, and sometimes things were worked out. One of the things we point out in the book is that there were many treaties that were signed, and to say that a treaty was signed was kind of inaccurate, because we would go out there, the officials would come from Washington, they'd draw up a treaty that says, well, in exchange for these goods and we're going to feed you for the next 30 years, you're going to give us these 2 million acres. And the Indians were sort of like puzzled by this, like, well, they had no idea of land ownership. They knew that, and of course they didn't understand English, so they would be asked to sign the treaty, and they thought it was kind of amusing, and they couldn't sign their names. They didn't speak English, so they would actually do something like touch the pen, and an army clerk would sign, sometimes even just make up a name,
wow,
and sign it.
Didn't know that.
And suddenly the treaty was enforceable. So the next year, when they came back to their usual hunting grounds and they saw a fort there instead, and they were told to keep out, they were like, "How did this happen?" And suddenly, the hunting grounds that for generations they had used to hunt buffalo had become an army garrison, or had become a series of farms and ranches.
And this book right now can be used as a mirror from the past, looking at what's happening today, because there are so many cultures now in the United States that some cultures feel like they're being pushed aside to accommodate other cultures, and there has been violence because of that.
There is, and I think one of the reasons why the story, I'm hoping it does get used in schools and parents want to share the book with their children, is because what was happening between our culture and the Indian culture, as you said, can be mirrored in our relationships with other cultures.
Yes.
So what you're seeing here is one example that can be applied to other examples, and when we look at also the map of the United States, we're looking at something that changed dramatically, and what was somebody had to win and somebody had to lose, and the Indians were the ones who lost, and a lot of that territory that is now their subdivisions, their shopping malls was once Indian land, and basically was taken without compensation.
The Declaration of Independence, states these truths we hold to be self-evident: all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, certain unalienable rights. And the irony is, we embraced those words and didn't apply them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we applied them to ourselves.
To ourselves, yes.
To ourselves, but when we encountered the Indians, and I should point out that there are characters in the story, in the book, The Heart of Everything, that is, who did understand and have empathy for the Indians and tried to advocate on their behalf. And in fact, Red Cloud himself, when he retired as a military leader, so to speak, that's what he spent the rest of his life doing, being an advocate for Indian causes and especially for educating Indian children. And he would make trips to Washington and speak to Congress. And his very first trip in 1870, he was invited to Washington, and he went. And it was his first time ever on a train. And he goes from South Dakota all the way to Washington and New York City. He gave a speech in New York City at what is now called Cooper Union, and thousands of people lined up to hear him. But when he was personally hosted by President Ulysses Grant at a reception at the White House, and basically what he realized and what he spent the rest of his life doing is we can't militarily defeat the white man. They just get too many guns. The technology is much greater than anything we could ever hope to have. So what he was advocating is, listen, why don't we work together, peacefully on education, on other issues, and that some of he was successful with some of that. Yeah. But with the reservation system was inevitable, and he realized, as onerous as it was, that they were being confined. I mean, the land that was given to the various tribes to be reservations were the land that nobody else wanted. There was no value to it, so it was. So give it to the Indians, let them live on it, and we'll take the valuable land. But Red Cloud realized that, and so he did spend the rest of his life as an advocate for his people. And in fact, when he died in 1909, his obituary was on the front page of the New York Times. He was considered this great, legendary Indian leader, but then, all through the 1900s, he sort of faded into the mists of history.
It's not ancient history. 1909 is really not that long ago.
No, over a century ago.
The very fact that there are photographs of the people you're talking about,
yes,
it kind of underscores the fact that, hey, this is not that long ago. Gosh, there's so many great things about the fact that you've written this and published it. I have a copy of the Young Reader's edition of The Heart of Everything That Is. If you call me, I will put your name on it, and you can have it for somebody in your family who might enjoy it and appreciate it and become better because of it. Tom, do you have a website you can direct us to for the rest of us?
Yes, well, I have a website, and it's Tom Clavin, TomClavin, TomClavin.com, and it's got the original Heart of Everything That Is on there. And of course, I'm a big advocate of your local bookstore, so I always recommend it. If people say, "Where can I find the book?" my first suggestion is, well, if you have a local bookstore, would you please inquire there first and help keep these people in business? They certainly exist to keep me in business as a writer. I wouldn't be in business without bookstores.
Absolutely.
And then if you don't have any other choice, of course, you can go to BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com, and those other usual sources.
Tom Clavin, as I said before, you are a superstar. Never tell me we don't have big names on our show. Tom Clavin is a big name. Thank you. Let me give away the book. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
Good morning. This is Bradley.
Bradley, do you know where we are?
Yes, I do.
The book will be waiting for you, okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Tom Clavin, again, thank you so much for being on the air with us today.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.
All right, we'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Carmen Roberts.
I actually can't believe that we're having to fight
to protect the security, in a court system to protect the security of our nation. I can't even believe it.
President Trump expressing his dismay about the court battle over his travel ban. The issues before an appeals court, which could hand down a decision at any time. Another legal battle, this time in